Hey, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Midnight Showing. My name is Eve. I'm your host, and sorry about all the Christmas stuff. And obviously, I've positioned my little post for doing these videos somewhere else because I have the tree over here to my right. I know it's been a while, but today I'm going to cover Transformers on 35mm film and digital in celebration of the release of the new Bumblebee movie, standalone Bumblebee movie, I guess, which is a prequel, and I don't think Michael Bay directed it. So I'm just going to talk about running Transformers movies on film and when it also transitioned into digital. Transformers came out the summer of 2007. I think it was July 4th week or a couple days before July 4th. Or July 4th, I don't remember exactly. It was somewhere around that date. And it opened up 35mm and was a big hit. And as I mentioned before, I was working between two theaters around this time in 07. Summer of 07 is when I started doing IMAX, and the 6-screen theater, I was doing the 35mm stuff, and I would also do some 35mm at the 18-screen theater. So this movie was a big hit, people loved it, and obviously it spawned 4 more sequels. So when this movie came out on 35mm, it was a long movie, I think it was about 7 reels, and I remember Paramount did this thing with the film cans, where you get the 3 cans, and 1 can they would lock with a number pad. And the combination for the lock would not arrive until the day you had to build the print. So the prints would come in a few days before, but you can build up like the rest, but like 2, maybe 3 reels would be locked up. So Paramount Pictures kind of did that with the security of that. Like also they did that with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I think they did that with the Iron Man film. But I'll cover that in March when Captain Marvel comes out. So I built up the print at the 6-plex. I ran it on 35 there. Now, when I was working at the 18 Theater in New Rock City, and Movieland was a 6-plex, at New Rock, we weren't showing an IMAX movie at the time. So what they would do in place of, like when they had no movie playing in the IMAX theater, up there in the projection booth, they had a 35mm projector, and they would run 35mm movies up there in between IMAX releases. And this was like a time when IMAX was still kind of getting big, and they would release like maybe 8-10 movies a year. Hollywood DMRs, not the documentaries. And so to fill up the theater and get some revenue out of it, they would show a 35mm showing of movies, and they would call it large screen. If anybody who lives in Westchester County and remembers going to New Rock and you see a movie called Large Screen, that was an IMAX. They showed it in the IMAX theater, but it wasn't IMAX. It was 35mm film. And what they would do is they would project regular 35mm, and I think it was like a special lens, and it would blow up the image on the screen, which was the size, I think, 6 to 8 stories tall. But the image, like a DMR, would just fill up the center of the screen. But because it was 35mm and they were trying to like maximize the amount they could with the size, it really didn't look very good. 35mm movies look terrible, like really being blown up. I remember running this large screen, and we would just sit upstairs every show. We'd run it and just hang out upstairs. During the movie, I can walk down to the regular 35 booth and hang out with the projectionist there, waiting for this to drop so I can thread it up and run it again. But it looked really bad. You could see the aperture plate, and you can see like the scratches on the side. And if the aperture plate wasn't like in all the way, you can see like the soundtrack of the film. Especially when you're showing a flat movie, this is scope. But even this, when you're projecting on a screen with no masking, I mean the masking for an IMAX is like huge, but you don't have a masking to like fit around the image to kind of frame it properly. So if it's not framed properly, you can see things on the side, like scratches and stuff. And again, like the soundtrack that runs on the film. And also, because it was blown up so, like, huge, it'd be, like, out of focus in certain areas, really grainy. It just wouldn't look right. But people went anyway. And they did this for a while. Until I think we went digital and we weren't getting any 35mm prints, and we were the only ones running IMAX film until that went digital. September of 2007, we IMAX and Paramount re-released Transformers in IMAX DMR in September. It was like a week or 2 week long engagement, and it was just like a filler movie. It was like, early September, or September 21st or something like that. And, it was a dead weekend, released Transformers in IMAX, maybe like 10, 20 people would show up because everybody already saw it when it first came out. And it looked great, like in a DMR. Like, IMAX knows how to really blow up movies and like clear it up and stuff like that. So I would never suggest trying to run a 35mm with like this ultra anamorphic like lens. But yeah, I ran this on 35mm in IMAX, and I actually still have a trailer for it right here. Transformers, Scope, Green Band, Paramount Pictures, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It's trailer number 4. I'm assuming it was the second version that came out. They've always had different versions of trailers, so that was never used, by the way. So, fast forward to 2009. I was doing IMAX full-time at the time. I started doing it full-time. And we received prints of Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. I think I built it up, or my boss did, or we both did it together. I don't really remember. But I was really excited to see it because the movie apparently was shot with IMAX cameras, and because of the success of Dark Knight and how the Dark Knight utilized IMAX film in making the movie, it really made a difference, and it made you want to go see IMAX movies, DMR prints. And so I was excited. We built it up, and my boss ran it, and I was up there with him, and I said, you know what, let me go watch this movie. And I started watching it. I couldn't wait to see the IMAX footage and to see the Transformers, just like, on like a 6 to 8 story tall screen. It was gonna be awesome. I had to wait about 40 minutes into the movie, and they've already passed like so many action scenes and everything, and I had to wait about 40 minutes, and suddenly that fight in Transformers Part 2, where they fight in the woods with the trees and everything, that's when the IMAX footage kicked in. And I was like, finally. And it looked great. And then the fight was over, and then it was just more DMR throughout the film. And then then another scene pops up, I guess, with the giant Constructa bots or whatever they're called. They all get together and form that giant monster, and that was IMAX footage. But there wasn't much. There was maybe 10, 15 minutes worth of IMAX footage. Not as much as Dark Knight. But I could see why, because the special effects rendering, I'm sure, was crazy, back then, with, shooting on film, IMAX film, and rendering all those frames. I'm sure it's a timely process. But yeah, I ran it. It was a big movie. I also ran out 35mm, and I did some interlocks for it. And I've mentioned what interlocks were before, connecting the film to multiple projectors and running them, the show was sold out. So we ran Transformers, did very well. Fast forward to 2 years later, digital has already arrived, and my work with Transformers was more administrative now, where I was ingesting hard drives into an ingest port and just uploading the content and building a playlist for Transformers 3 and Transformers 4, and that was it. So, it's digital. There's not much to talk about with that. That's why film is so good. You have stories to tell. You work with people and you run crazy movies like this, and so that's my experience running the Transformers franchise. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. This is an 80s Die Hard production. Happy holidays. I'm going to see if I can do a video before Christmas or on Christmas. If not, I'll see you guys next year. Later. Happy holidays. Bye.